All right, Gavin, I think we're ready to almost get started today. Can we do a mic check on the panel members before we officially start the meeting? We'll go, I'll identify the panel members and see if you guys can check your mics for me. Scott?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect. Mr. Bora?
Hi, it's John Zweifler. Dr. Bora's not going to be on the call. Dr. John Zweifler. Yep. Hi. And then Steve, I believe Steve Rhodes may be on the call from Department of Public Health as well.
Perfect. Thank you for Department of Public Health. Director Miller?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect. Director Carbajal?
Good evening.
Thank you. Jim, are you online? I know we see your background there. All right, so you see Jim on video, we'll give him a second before we test him out. I do also want to test out members of the public who are going to be participating in the meeting. I have one hand up, so I'm going to try and unmute Michael Lynn just to confirm that audio is working on that end, and also to confirm that we can make sure we identify you guys correctly. Michael Lynn?
Yeah, Miguel, I can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. All right. CMAC, Gavin, are we up and running on CMAC now?
Yes, he was going to start you at 6 o'clock, no matter what. He's got some other tasks he's busy with doing, and I also have you spun up on YouTube.
Perfect, thank you. All right, let me see. Everybody else. We're going to go ahead and wait for Jim Betts, who's a critical component of this community meeting today. Once we have his audio up and running, we'll go ahead and proceed with the beginning of today's community meeting.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, guys.
Cool. You're the only guy wearing a tie making the rest of us look bad, so.
Well, I'd say something prideful, but we have a toxicologist online with us that I'm going to defer to. So, he's the smartest guy in the room this time.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We've confirmed that everybody's audios work. We've also confirmed that we have members of the public. Looks like we're up to 16 members of the public today. And we'll get this meeting started.
Miguel, before you start, I've got my paralegal here and we've worked it so we can run the PowerPoint from my side.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say go, I'll just give a 6-minute intro that runs through our PowerPoint slides.
Perfect. I will identify you at that point.
Okay.
Great. All right. So this is the first of many community meetings, if necessary, that we'll have related to the Maxie L. Parks Community Center contamination and cleanup plan. We're having this community meeting for the benefit of the public. Not only did we disclose the identified contamination, I want to say a few weeks ago now, but we also want to make sure that the public had an opportunity to hear from the experts. So we've tried to get all the content experts in the same room virtually to make sure that the public had opportunity to address any questions related to public health, the toxicologist reports, any other matters related to the parks facility, and also to the quality of underground water. So with us today, joining us officially, is our Director of the Parks Department, TJ Miller, our Director of Department of Public Utilities that oversees our underground water quality is Director Michael Carbajal, Dr. John Seppler from the Fresno County Public Health, our toxicologist expert, Scott Dreyer, and then of course our outside legal counsel, Jim Betts, who's going to begin the community with a brief overview of how we got to this point. With that, I do want to remind the public, outside of, in addition to disclosing the contamination that we identified at the Maxie Parks Community Center, the council also voted during the budget adoption in October to set aside $500,000 to begin the cleanup work once we get the green light from the state on what that cleanup plan is going to look like. So we have secured the resources to begin the process. We have also relocated the tenants of the Maxie Parks Community Center to the Mary Ellen Brown Community Center to ensure that the community services that they have been providing continue to be provided to the community during this pandemic, and the facility has been secured since we took action a few weeks ago, and it remains closed at this time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our outside counsel who has been handling this process from the get-go. Jim, you have the floor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jim Betts. I am a contract attorney for the city of Fresno. I'm going to give you about a 5-minute history on the Maxie Parks Community Center from our standpoint. Let's go to slide 2. This is a matter involving subsurface contamination underneath the community center. It's located at 1265 East Elm Street in Fresno, California. To get our bearings on this, let's take a look at a site map. Paul, is that coming up? Can you see the site map, Miguel?
Yes, we can all see it. It'll work
Okay,
perfect.
perfect. So the area that the community center is located in is just west of downtown Fresno. It is north of the 99 and State Route 41 interchange. And it's just about 2 or 3 blocks west of 99. That's where the community center is located. From the city standpoint, this particular issue first came to our attention on May 1st of 2019, when the city received notice from the Regional Water Quality Control Board that a contaminant, which is perchloroethylene, also called PERC, was discovered in a monitoring well in an adjacent gas station. Let's get a little bit of background on this property. Go to our slide number 5. This property in the early 2000s was owned by the Fresno Redevelopment Agency. In 2005, the property was sold to the Employment Opportunities Commission for development. The site itself is about 6.6 acres. As part of that agreement, there was going to be a phase 1 analysis of the site to see if there were any historic problems with contamination. We've reviewed those files, and we have not been able to locate any particular information bearing on that contamination. So the property was developed by the EOC, and in 2009, it was sold back to the city of Fresno. If we take a look at slide 6, we'll see an aerial video of the site as developed. In this particular slide, the Maxie Parks Community Center is designated as West Fresno Family Resource Center. It was subsequently renamed when it came to the city. Just to the left of the community center, you'll see a gas station, that is Valley Gas. This contamination was discovered because there are some contamination issues associated with that property, which resulted in the installation of a monitoring well. That monitoring well in 2019 started to show evidence of this perchloroethylene, or PERC as they call it, which resulted in the notice that we got from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Now, if you look just on the bottom of this photograph, there's a grassy field just south of the community center. I want to go to a different map that shows this same area, and we've put a border around this area. This particular footprint of this property was occupied in the 50s by a dry cleaner known as the Imperial Laundry. That was a suspected source of this contamination that was identified by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. There have not been any other uses of this particular property that could have generated the chlorinated solvents that are at issue in this particular investigation. But that property, again, 60 years ago, was occupied by a dry cleaner that would have used this product. Let's go to slide 8. In response to the Water Board's request, the city retained an environmental consulting firm known as Kleinfelder to do a site assessment out on the property. So this is the report that was generated in response by Kleinfelder. We got it in May of 2020. That confirmed the presence of chlorinated solvents underneath the footprint for the old Imperial Laundry. In addition to that investigation, the city also asked Kleinfelder to do an investigation into potential vapor intrusion or harmful airborne contaminants from this contamination within the community center itself. Those reports were generated. They were turned over to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And in July of this year, in this summer, the Water Board came back to us. They approved the investigative work done by Kleinfelder, which confirmed the presence of chlorinated solvents, and asked us to now do a second phase of investigation to define the scope of the potential contamination. If we go to slide 11, we'll see that the city then asked Kleinfelder to again develop a scope of work to tackle this second phase of the contamination. That work is ongoing at the present, is about to commence, I should say. It has been budgeted by the city. That second phase of contamination, if we go to slide 12, is going to run just under $130,000 to do this work. We believe that Kleinfelder will tee up this project and start its work very, very shortly. We expect to have some results from them back in either late January or perhaps February of 2021. In the meantime, because of potential health and safety issues associated with the community center, the city retained a noted toxicologist, who is Scott Dwyer, to evaluate the air quality within the community center. He did that, and in a report that he generated just about 2 months ago, he examined the specific and detailed testing performed by Kleinfelder and issued a report which concluded that from a practical standpoint, the air quality reported within the center do not pose a health and safety risk, assuming occupancy as a commercial building, which is what it is and what it's been used for. Dr. Dwyer did request that the city do some follow-up investigations to see what subsequent air quality samples show, and we have included those within the scope of work being performed by Kleinfelder. So if we take a step back and look at where we are right now, there is contamination within the footprint of the community center. There is a second phase of detailed site sampling that is going to be conducted by Kleinfelder over the next 60 days. A report issued to tell us what the full scope of contamination on the site is. From that, the city will develop a remediation plan in consult with the community center, and in keeping with Councilmember Arias's direction, that will be shared transparently with the community. And that's it. I'm happy to respond to any questions people may have.
Thank you, Jim. And just to reiterate, the council has made the decision, the city, to keep the community center closed into the remediation, or in layman's term, the cleanup is complete. So until that cleanup is complete, the community center will remain closed to the public and to any tenant for operations. And we'll continue to have the organizations operate out of the Mary Ellen Brown Center, where we've made some adjustments for them to operate there during the remainder of the pandemic. Given the restrictions of the state emergency order during the COVID pandemic, we are limited to what kind of congregate community events we can have at any community center. So we're hopeful that's going to have a minimal disruption from the point of community activities during this period where it remains closed. And Jim, if you confirm, we expect to have a cleanup plan sometime in January for us to
So the steps that it'll take is that in January or February, we should get the Kleinfelder reports back. Those reports will then be analyzed to tell us what the exact steps for contamination remediation we need to undertake. You can pretty much bank on the fact that we'll be doing some kind of vapor extraction where we pull air out of the ground soil, volatile organic compounds, vapors out of the ground soil, filter them, and reduce the extent of contamination that way. There is a potential question about whether there is any groundwater cleanup that will be within the scope of that investigation. We're cautiously optimistic that won't be required because of the low levels of contamination that have been found, but we'll have to see. The actual remediation plan will probably take at least a few more months following receipt of the investigation report to complete.
Got it. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to go first to our Director of Public Utilities, just for him to provide us an overview of whether there's been any contamination to groundwater thus far, and any questions or any details you'd like to provide us on groundwater before we go out to the public for Q&A. Director Carvajal?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Mike Carvajal, Director of Public Utilities for the City of Fresno. And the first thing what I'd like to do is start off with is to mention that the city and the Department of Public Utilities, continuously monitors and tests the drinking water from the city's public drinking water system. And the water always meets and it exceeds the state and federal requirements that safeguard the public's health. And so if any of the city's water supplies are found to be out of compliance with the state and federal regulations, those water supply sources are removed from service immediately. And so tetrachloroethylene, as we're talking about today, or as Mr. Which is referred to as PCE, or as Mr. Betts mentioned, it's commonly referred to as PERC. It is a regulated contaminant with an established maximum contaminant level for drinking water, and that's set at 5 micrograms per liter, or 5 parts per billion. And the city has been testing its municipal wells for PCE based upon the records that I have. It shows testing dates back to the 1980s. And so the city has a long history of testing its water supply for this specific contaminant. I think it's safe to say that, the city's water from the city's drinking water system is safe to drink. And that includes water that is supplied to the park and to the resource center there. So if anybody has consumed any water from that facility, that water is coming from the city's drinking water system. That water has been, is safe to drink. If the public has any questions about a private groundwater well, I would recommend that you contact the Fresno County Department of Public Health. They have representatives who are attending this meeting who might be able to provide additional information.
Great. Thank you, Director Carvajal. And as I mentioned up front, this community meeting is really for the benefit of the public to have access to our experts that we've been communicating and working with for the last few months on this matter. So instead of letting our panelists talk to the public for another hour, I'm going to go ahead and start going to the public for any questions that you may have, and then we'll call on the panel members who are best equipped to answer those questions. So if you're a member of the public, which I think we see about 23 attendees, please raise your hand on the system. I will identify you, unmute you, and then you're allowed to ask any questions you have of the panel related to this issue. I think the first one I see is Local Conservation Corp. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Please identify yourself and ask any questions that you may have.
Good evening. My name is Sean Riggins, and I am the director of the Local Conservation Corps, part of Fresno ELC. We're located at 1815 East California, right across from the Maxie Park Center. My question is, we received that same notification that Maxie Parks received back in, I believe it was 2018, 2019, and we actually have wells on our campus as well. And there was an environmental company that would come out at least twice a year. They would perform the same tests here as they did across the street. And when they were installed at our site, we were told it was because there was possible contamination coming from across the street. So when we see the article that was in the Bee back in October, became very concerned because, like I said, our well on our site right across from Maxie Park was installed at the same time. One other interesting thing is we haven't seen a company come out to do any testing in about a year until yesterday. Yesterday, the company was back here on site doing testing.
Mr. Riggins, do you have any questions?
Yeah, my question is, is there any, should we be concerned since we're right across the street, we have the same wells that they have at Maxie Park. And, yesterday when the company came out and started testing again after, 8 to 10 months of not seeing them, that really kind of brought something up to me.
Okay, and just for the record, I have pulled up a aerial map of the location of Maxie Parks and shared it with the public. which shows the Fresno ELC LLC buildings across the street, just for the public's reference. That's the location here that Mr. Riggins is referencing. Anybody from the panel that can answer his question?
Well, Miguel, I'm happy to just spin real quick. The timing that you're talking about on the testing seems right, because Kleinfelder's work culminated in May of this year. And then the second phase of the investigation that's just starting now would be getting underway within either in the next few days, or it sounds like it's already started out at that facility. So from a timing standpoint, that seems correct. We're not aware of anything at this point that suggests that there's a particular problem with the groundwater in the area. But I mean, that's why the testing is ongoing, and we're going to be transparent about the results of that.
Okay.
Anybody else wishing to address that question?
Well, hi, this is John Zweifler with the Department of Public Health, and I'll be working with our Department of Environmental Health to follow up and to ensure that there's been proper surveillance of the groundwater in that area. So we'll follow up specifically regarding the wells with the local conservation corps.
Okay, and just for my understanding, are these monitoring wells, or do they have their own county water well system?
Those would be monitoring wells, Miguel.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions, Mr. Riggins?
No, I would just, would we have access to any reports that was obtained during the time that they were testing the wells? And
Yes.
going forward with the continued testing, will the LCC be part of that testing, as we're right across the street and have the same well?
If I am understanding your question, we will provide you access to all the reports from the toxicologist and the results of those reports. And I'm assuming they are already part of the area that's being tested, right, Jim?
That's correct. And all of the investigation reports are public documents through the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So this is all going to be available information.
Okay, thank you.
And if you'd like to get access to those reports, just shoot me an email and I'll send you the PDF versions of all the reports that we have, so you don't have to go to the State Water Board.
Okay, will do. Thanks, council member.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to West Fresno Family Resource Center. I'm unmuting you you have the floor for any questions you may have.
Hi, Miguel. Hi, everybody. It's Yolanda Randos, Director of West Fresno Family Resource Center. Thank you all panels for providing this information to our community. I just had a couple of questions. I guess one question I had. So it was just stated that the city was notified May of last year that there was a suspect of a contamination there at Maxie Park. So I'm just really curious as to why almost a year later, like something was done. Like that was my question. And then even back in May of last year, why wasn't any type of notice or something given to the folks that were working in the building that, hey, there potentially could be some type of contamination there? That's my first question. And then my other question is, someone can please help me kind of understand when it says the toxins that were found, basically, and I'm trying to kind of paraphrase here, that it was okay because of the building was being utilized for commercial use. Okay, I'm not quite understanding that. As a director, I'm really concerned with my staff. We were there in that building 5 days a week, working 8-10 hours a day, and inhaling those toxins. And when I'm talking with my staff, and just thinking back of some of the health concerns they have had over the years, and then looking at that toxin that was found, like there was definitely a correlation. So, and I don't know, I've never been in this situation, so I'm just kind of at a loss here. So if someone can please help me understand so that I can be able to share that information with my staff to kind of relieve them of any health concerns that they may have had. If you can address those two questions, I would really appreciate it.
Yolanda, if you can just do me a favor and just ask your two questions again so we can be clear about who can potentially answer them.
Okay, one, the city was notified May of last year,
Mhm.
but we are just getting this information in this year, March of 2020. Why was it so long in reacting to the letter that you all received? That was question number one.
Okay.
Question number two, the health concerns. You know, being in that building 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, staff with health concerns. How can I address them? How can I assure them that the health concern that they have is not directly related to that toxin that was found?
Okay, so if I understand your question, your first one is the timing of the notification to the tenant.
Right.
And then your second question is what health concerns should you be concerned about for the tenants of that building?
Right.
Okay,
And
Who
not
can
just
answer the
my
first
staff, city staff as well.
correct. Yeah.
Miguel, I'm happy to jump in on the first question. So the notice that the city received in May of 19 was not that there was contamination on city property. It was that there was contamination on adjacent property, right? So the contamination that we're talking about is somewhere in the area of 60 to 70 years old. So in May of 19, we got the first notice from Regional Water. The city put out to bid the development of the scope of work, bid the ensuing investigation, all of that under the supervision of Regional Water Quality, generated a report in May of 2019, in May of 2020, at a time when most of the city was, and most of private businesses were shut down. So the disclosure to the public actually occurred fairly quickly, given the normal delays associated with the lockdowns that were in place around the city. By the time Mr. Arias and I began speaking, the community center had already been relocated and was empty. We've got a health report that says it does not pose a risk of harm to be in it, but just for precaution's sake, the decision was made to go ahead and keep the community center vacant at the present time until the next round of testing is completed.
And questions of public health. What are the potential exposures based on the toxicologist report for anybody who's been utilizing that facility?
Let's defer to Dr. Dwyer on that issue.
Right. So the analysis I did was based on 11 indoor air samples collected within the Maxie Parks Community Center and 4 samples collected in outdoor air as well. And we did find a number of volatile chemicals in the air. But we have to remember, we live in a developed world, and no matter where we collect air samples anywhere in a city, we will find some chemicals in that air. So what we need to pay attention to, though, are the concentrations of those chemicals at a level that we should be concerned about. And in the case of the air samples we collected at the community center, that's not the case. These levels are exceedingly low. As an example, well, let me address, I think you had your first question was about evaluating this as a commercial property. So all that means is we didn't look at this building as if somebody lives there and is in that building 24/7, 350, 365 days a year. What we looked at was somebody who works there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week throughout the year. Based on that evaluation, and this would actually be true for if somebody actually lived there, again, the concentrations we found of PERC and a couple other contaminants are exceedingly low. The concentration of PERC is actually more than 10,000 times lower than what Cal OSHA says is okay in workplace air. And this is consistent with regulatory levels established by other agencies as well, like the American Conference of Government Industrial Hygienists. The level they say is safe for workers is also more than 10,000 times higher. Levels that are established in the EU are similar to those in the United States. They're pretty comparable as well. So I feel comfortable. I would feel comfortable working in that building based on the analysis that we did. I wouldn't have any trouble if a family member worked there either. I think the building is safe. I think out of an abundance of caution, it's has remained closed, and I have no problem with that. So hopefully I've answered your question. If not,
Director, do you have any other questions or
Yeah.
clarity?
Okay, so I just want to sum it up. I appreciate your answer. And what you are telling me, and again, it's based on a report and based on your experience, the air quality is I guess low enough that it would not cause any health concerns, and that that it was okay, that we were in that building, actually breathing that air, 5 days a week, 8-10 hours a day, and that it does not cause or would not cause any health concerns. And that's what you're telling me, and that's what the report is saying.
right, exactly.
And Scott, can you, my understanding of the analysis was that essentially the air was similar to the air within that area, correct? Is that?
That's true. So we found, I'm sorry.
Is that an accurate way to describe it?
Partly. So we found 3 chemicals that I would be concerned about. We found perc, we found benzene, and we found some chloroform in the indoor air. The perc I just addressed. I don't think it's at a level that would be of concern. In fact, it's not only below workplace levels, it's below levels that are found in toxicology studies of humans and the various health effects that they might encounter. Just lost my train of thought there.
Also, the benzene.
Right. So the benzene, the benzene, we found concentrations of benzene in the building that were identical to the concentrations we found outside the building. So the benzene that's in the building is probably coming from the area, gas stations, cars, whatever. Benzene is a very common chemical, but I don't think what was found in the building is related to the site or any past history on the site. Chloroform concentrations were within the range that are normally found inside buildings. They're often in the range of 1 to 20 micrograms per cubic meter. I think we were finding levels around 1 or slightly below 1. So these are pretty common levels. Sources of chloroform, there's a lot of them. They're in a lot of consumer products. They commonly off gas from community water supplies. If there's sinks, drinking water fountains, showers in the building, chloroform could be off gassing from the water. I don't know. I haven't seen the chemical reports for water quality, but those are common sources of chloroform. So I'm not too concerned about that. The perc is the one I would be concerned about, but again, levels are very, very low.
Director, do you have any other questions?
You know what? Not at the moment. I'll wait a little bit. Give someone else a chance.
Just raise your hand at any time and we'll go back to you.
Okay, great.
The next person is Mr. Bob Mitchell. You're unmuted if you'd like to have any questions posed and answered by the experts. Mr. Mitchell? We will come back to you after we go to Minister Murphy. Mr. Murphy?
Hi, how you doing?
Good. You have the floor.
I just wanted what was Scott saying earlier about the 8 hours days and 10 hours days. If that's so true, it's safe to work in, then why is the center closed right now? There was a lot of activity going on at the center that stopped. And like I drank water there. I breathed the air there. You're saying it's safe now, so why or reclose?
So there's 2 answers to that, and I'll take that question. One is an abundance of caution to make sure that we get to do the cleanup. That site needs to be accessed by the experts to do continued testing, and at some point to do the actual cleanup work. 2, we're in the pandemic, so we're not supposed to have congregate activities during the state of emergency. So there really isn't a need for us to have it open in the traditional sense. And 3, we have another community center in the Mary Allen Brown Center that we could easily relocate people and still provide the services that they've been providing all this time. As you know, most of our folks have been working remotely from home because we want to limit the amount of people indoors. So we found it in the best interest of everyone to shut down the facility until we complete the cleanup process, especially since we were undertaking additional testing and we need immediate access to that facility based on that work that needs to be done.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let me go back to Mr. Mitchell. Do you have any questions, Mr. Mitchell? We are unmuting you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Good. Good evening, everyone. I have first question has there been an effort to provide information to the houses just east of the Maxie Park Center? So if they wanted their ground to be tested, it is possible for it to be tested. That's number one. Number two, I guess it would be to Mr. Dwyer, if I'm pronouncing it correct. As that is considered a commercial building, and you have stated it's safe for operation as a commercial building and staff to be in there, are you giving consideration to the combination of the forms of chemicals you found within the building and the fact that it is used as a rec center for minor children who are still developing and how they would be impacted and affected by those chemicals? So if I could get the answer to those two to start with, please.
So Mr. Mitchell, I'll take the first question you posed. We have made an effort to communicate directly to all the neighbors in that area. We actually walked that whole neighborhood and provided flyers for this community meeting. We have also sent notices through snail mail beyond the 1,000-foot range on that area to make sure people were aware of, 1, the contamination, and 2, the opportunity to talk to the experts. So we are doing our best to communicate to people directly. And I'm open to any additional requests that the neighbors may have. We have not yet received a request from the neighbors for any additional precautionary testing in that area, but that is something that we are open to if it's requested from the neighbors or anybody else who may be impacted by the results of the toxicology. And your second question, I'll leave it up to our experts.
Right. You asked a great question. Children and elderly are more susceptible in general to chemical exposures. The evaluation that I did, while it was focused on a commercial land use, in my opinion, there's enough safety factor in that evaluation to cover even children or the elderly who might also use that building.
Okay, thank you. And follow up to that, Mr. Dwyer, you mentioned that outside air, you would consider it as being just the air that is in West Fresno. But wouldn't it be more probable that the benzene, which is one of the chemicals that is often used in cleaners, factory activity, could be high in that area because of the benzene seeping into the air from the contamination and not from vehicles or gasoline from cars?
I'm sorry. You're suggesting that possibly the benzene we're finding inside the building is coming from the site. Is that?
That, and you also stated you tested outside air, which had benzene in it also. And your feeling was that this is just the air that is in the West Fresno community.
Right.
I'm proposing that it is probably more so from the site itself, filtering up into the air in that immediate vicinity. Or perhaps you did studies in other locations in West Fresno to show the same amount of benzene in the air. You didn't mention that if you did so, sir.
No.
So, Mr. Mitchell, if I'm understanding your question is, you're asking whether this location is a source for the amount of benzene in the outside air.
That's correct.
Right. Let me jump in real quick. We don't have any historical use of this site for petroleum hydrocarbons. We do have an adjacent gas station, which we believe may have hydrocarbon problems. I don't want to step into that. That's outside our footprint. But we're not aware of any historical usage of this site that would suggest hydrocarbon contamination. But it's something to look at in the next round of investigation results to see if there's some problem there, but we're not anticipating that.
Well, I may be mistaken, and I'll leave it to you gentlemen as experts, but from my my layman's knowledge, benzene was one of the chemicals that is used in cleaners when they're cleaning clothing materials, etc. So that's why I made that statement. Maybe there, and back at that period of time in 1950, I'm certain there was not a lot of regulation on the use of benzene.
So I don't know if we're talking two different chemicals or we're talking about the same chemical.
Well, there are two different chemicals that, or three actually, that Mr. Dwyer mentioned. He mentioned chloroform in the building, he mentioned benzene, and he mentioned perc. So he also mentioned that when he exited the building, there was benzene in the air, and alluded to that being possibly just the air in West Fresno, that we just have that level of benzene in our air. And my question and our observations are, one, benzene is a chemical that heretofore had been used in cleaner operations. Two, that it may be the benzene seeping from the ground that is in the air in that particular area. And three, that he in fact do other samplings in West Fresno to determine that the air in West Fresno has the same level of benzene in any other locations.
Okay, I think I'm following you, Mr. Mitchell. So Jim, if you can make a note of that and we can add that to additional analysis that we plan to do.
Okay, very good.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, any other questions?
Well, that's it for right now, Councilman, and I thank you again.
Thank you. We'll go to Debbie Darden. You are next up. Any questions for the panel to consider and answer?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. And I just want to say good evening. My question is, and I don't know if it was stated, I wasn't on there a little earlier, but at the time that EOC was building the facility, if there was an EIR report done, and if so, what was the results? And if they did they dig deep enough to get the results of what we're dealing with today? And if there wasn't an EI report done, what was the reason as to why there wouldn't be?
And I think Jim can cover that question again. Go ahead, Jim.
So it's a good question. The original contract by which RDA sold the property to the EOC in 2005 talked about a phase one review. Phase one is not sampling on site, but rather is a historical look back at the use of the property to let us know whether there should be anything that we are concerned of. As we look back through the documentation for that transaction, we do not find a phase one report. So I just don't have any information on that. If we did a phase one report today based on regional water, we would find the Imperial Cleaners, which we believe is the source of the problem on site. The phase two work, which is actual sampling, was that which generated the Kleinfelder report in May of this year, and which is being undertaken today. And as was noted, they're out looking at monitoring wells. That makes sense. So we should see the reports of that further investigation in the next 60 days.
So Jim, if I can see if I can summarize that again, and if I'm correct, when the initial sale from this redevelopment agency to EOC took place, they only required a phase one, which is review the documents.
Right.
We don't have the findings on whether that occurred or what the result of that.
Right. We have not seen any evidence of what was done on the phase one. We assume it was done because it's in the contract, but I can't make a representation either way.
Okay. And phase two is actually digging in the ground, looking at actual samples, testing those samples, which is what we've done as part of our analysis. And just to give the community context, we recently sold a piece of grass to Fresno EOC, but prior to the sale, we did a phase one and a phase two analysis to confirm that the property was free of contamination before we sold it to EOC for the Head Start, facility. But at this point, we don't have any evidence that that phase one was completed back 20 years ago, whenever the sale took place.
Correct.
So can I still be heard?
Yes, of course.
And so if that is the case, and so are we not able to go back to where, I know the city of Fresno is handling it, but would EOC not have any type of responsibility as well, being that there was no information from the phase one? And I mean, you're talking about 2005, 2006. Now we're talking of 15 years later, 14 years, 2019, that there's contamination being done, and now we have to go and fix the problem.
Ms. Darden, that is an option. From my position and you know, where I've come from as a city is, the city owned the property before they built the community center. We've owned it after. So we're assuming all responsibility to clean up the contamination and get it to a point that we can use it again. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time, you know, tracking down whose fault it was 15 years ago. I wanted to focus on the cleanup, since it was city owned prior to the construction and it's city owned after the construction.
So is it safe to say, after you just talked about the purchase that they just made, that for now on, anything that's being built in District 3, if there isn't a phase one, that there will be a phase one and phase two followed to ensure that there's no contamination?
My position as a council member of one, I've taken the position that any city property that we sell for public use will undergo a phase one and phase two, so that everybody knows exactly what they're acquiring before they begin construction. But that's a position I've taken, and it's going to be up to the full council on what level of review they do whenever they look at potentially selling a city property.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Sharella Nicholson, you're up next.
Hi, thank you, council member. This is Sharela. And I just want to know, just looking ahead with the city taking responsibility, what part of the budget will the cleanup come out of? Will you guys reallocate?
So the council authorized $500,000 of general fund with direction for us to first look at. We do have a revolving loan fund of about $850 for, you know, brownfield cleanup. So we're going to go to that fund first. If that money's not available, we will, our plan B will be general fund. We're also actively applying for some state and federal grants to help with the cleanup. But what the council has said is try and get state and federal money. But if you can't, we will fund it out of general fund. And that's the money that we will use. As a matter of fact, the contract for the additional toxicology report and study is on the agenda for next week's council meeting, where we're increasing it to approximately $200,000 to cover the cost that was outlined by Mr. Betts earlier. So we are taking full responsibility to find the money and trying to secure first state and federal resources, but the money will be available immediately upon having a approved plan from the state to clean up the site.
Thank you.
We'll go to Mr. Mitchell. You have some additional questions?
Yes. As everyone, I'm sure there on your panel has the greatest concern about children, so do I. And Mr. Dyer, you mentioned that even under the present contamination, you would not be concerned about children being there. I would say that that building does not have the best ventilation. It is still operating swamp coolers. Heat gets very warm in that location. I've been in it on numerous occasions for meetings. And I would be concerned of a child going there each and every day, as they do, using it with the contamination level as it is, and the extreme poor circulation of air that is brought in by the swamp coolers, especially with you stating already that there's a high level of, not a high level, I don't want to put words in your mouth. There is a level of benzene detected in the air outside of the building. And swamp coolers bring air in from outside at a high level. So I would like you to consider that in your reporting relative to that building being operable for children on a daily basis who will be in there for a period of time each and every day.
So, Mr. Mitchell, I do have a quick update that I forgot to mention to the public. Prior to notification of this, we had already set aside funding to convert the swamp coolers to an air conditioning system for that community center. That, of course, I think the price tag is about $500,000 because it wasn't designed with an central air conditioning system from the beginning of the construction. That engineering, we're first going to do the engineering work to figure out what retrofits to the roof, where the air conditioners were going to sit at. Since we now have this cleanup plan that we have to develop, I've been told by the folks that as we develop the cleanup plan and we develop the air conditioning system, we're going to be able to simultaneously plan for the filtration system to be much better than we had originally planned for. So the upgrade to the air system will allow us an opportunity to install the right filters to clean up that air far beyond what it was with swamp coolers.
Thank you again. That is a great relief because that building does need that and has needed it for some time. So thank you again.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the public as we reach the 7 o'clock hour? And again, this is an opportunity to ask as many questions as possible from any of you and to try and get you the best answers we have. If not, we can take notes of those questions and any requests and incorporate them into our cleanup plan. I'll go back to Mr. Murphy.
Councilman, with this issue coming up, are we looking into all the resources, all the West Fresno centers that we got, like Hinton Center, all the other community centers in West Fresno?
I can tell you, Mr. Murphy, that I have 5 community centers in my district alone. And if we were to do a full up and down analysis, we're probably looking at $20 million of renovations and improvements across all those centers. That includes the Hinton Center, which is not owned by the city, but it's owned by private individuals. Mm-hmm. So our plan going forward is going to be doing an analysis of all the needs of those community centers, but that price tag will be significant. My goal is to first get Maxie Parks operational again, since it's the newest facility we have. And we have set aside some money to start making improvements in some of the other community centers. What comes to mind right now in the immediate is Mary Ellen Brown is scheduled for renovations and upgrades to the restrooms. And Director Miller, if I'm missing any, we do have some plans for improvements at Frank H. Ball as well. So there is several projects in the pipeline that we are in the process of designing and bidding to do smaller improvements in all those community centers. But those centers some of them are 40 to 50 years old, and they require significant investment to bring them up to the standard of a Maxie Parks, to be frank with you. But Director Miller, I'll defer to you for any other updates on those improvements.
Thank you, Council President. Yes, you're correct. We're doing the restroom retrofits at Mariella Brown and Frank H. Ball and also Hinton Park. So you're correct. The center does not belong to the city, but the park does. So we are redoing those outdoor restrooms as well as lighting. We have other renovations on the books in terms of retrofitting all of the fixtures in all of our community centers citywide. And we are also doing some renovations of our pools as well.
Great.
So there's work going in all over the city.
Yeah, and just for those retrofits, we use CARES Act money to make all the faucets touchless to help with minimizing the spread of COVID. That's taking place across the city at every park and every city facility, including City Hall. So we are making our way towards all of them. But to be frank with you, we have a lot more needs than we have money for. But there are several projects that are in the queue for improvements.
Correct. And the restroom work at Mariella Brown and Frank H. Ball, those are, in addition to the CARES Act, making the touchless fixtures, those are full restroom renovations.
Understandable, because Councilman Harris, thank you for all that you do for District 3. We are the last district to get looked upon. So thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I'll go to Mrs. Nicholson again. You have the floor.
Thank you, council member. Just quick question. When you when you get the municipal policy and administrative order to require all phase 1 and phase 2, the environmental site assessments for all property sold by the city of Fresno, can you like notify the public, either through any channels? Can you notify the public when that policy is adopted?
Yes.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder to the public, January of this year, a new state law passed that any sale of city-owned property must go through the Surplus Act. So we must first declare it surplus in a public meeting and announce it to the world before we begin negotiations with the sale of that property. So that will be very public. As a matter of fact, on December 10th, we'll be having a couple of parcels that the city owns designated as surplus to begin that public notification process. But I will bring you, I'll make sure we inform you when we bring forward a policy around the analysis that we should be doing before we dispose of a property. Historically, the city of Fresno disposed of property as is. So it was up to the buyer to do their due diligence versus the city. We will now go to Sabrina Cowley. You have the floor. Ms. Cowley?
Yes, I'm wondering if anyone has done a study or looked at existing study about low level contamination exposure over time, because I've been listening to the conversation about contamination being low, but I know there is some environmental research about the risk associated with low level exposure over prolonged periods of time. So I didn't hear that mentioned. If anyone had looked into that, that is a risk, but I hadn't heard it discussed or elevated.
I think I can take that. Yeah, so the evaluation that I did was based on a 25-year career, someone who's working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day in the building for 25 years. So the evaluation does cover long-term exposure to the low levels that we see in this building. So hopefully that addresses your concern.
And there is no compounding effect based on the fact that the area already has a lot of contaminants, and I think you answered this question, that the inside contaminants are equal to what's going on outside. Is that correct?
Just in the case of benzene, that's what I was referring to. But in terms of cumulative effects, yes, in the evaluation that I did, we develop estimates of toxicity for each chemical, and then we add those up to arrive at a single number that describes the situation in the building. So that also was done.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna go now to Michael Lynn. You are unmuted. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. Good evening. I was begging you to unmute me.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to try and make it as brief as possible since we're at the 7 o'clock hour. First of all, there's a community garden that's on that property. That was actually, and Yolanda, if you're still on, you can ask, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were taking food from that community garden, the produce, and actually preparing some of the senior meals with it. And I'm wondering, would that have any kind of effect on any of the people who consume food from that garden? And then also, can you briefly at some point in time kind of give us a description of what remediation is going to look like once it starts?
Sure, we'll let Mr. Betts answer those two questions. Hopefully he can give us a preview of the cleanup and then the above ground community garden.
Okay, so we did actually look at the community garden. Those are raised planter beds, right? So they're not necessarily burrowed into the existing soil. and they are located away from the footprint of the Imperial Garden. So when we looked at that, our opinion was that it was a very unlikely source for contamination that could pose any health risk to anybody eating vegetables that are generated out of there. At the same time, we wouldn't be promoting continued use of that until we have a more complete investigation of the site, but we have no reason to suspect that there are any concerns about that.
And Jim, if I recall, those gardens were created with like Home Depot topsoil, right?
Right, correct. It was imported in. And I'm sorry, the second part of the question was?
What would the cleanup kind of look like? What would a cleanup plan look like?
So in a kind of a typical chlorinated solvent cleanup, you're going to have vapor extraction where borings are created into the soil in the areas where contamination is focused, and the vapors are pumped out and run through a filtration system, a carbon canister or something of that type that will pull those contaminants out. Chlorinated solvents are particularly stubborn to remediate, so that is not a short process. That vapor extraction could go on for an extended period. Secondly, if we have the water level at that site is right around about 100 feet, and the grounds are dense. So we are hopeful that there is not substantially impacted groundwater in the area. As Director Carbajal pointed out, all of the sampling from the city has not shown chlorinated solvents in excess of thresholds in the drinking wells that were located out in that area. I think the closest drinking well is a ways away, though. It's about half a mile away. That's my understanding. So the second part of that could, though, be pump and treat as far as groundwater in the area that may be impacted. We're cautiously optimistic that we won't have that problem because of the relatively low levels of contaminants that have been found and because of the depth to groundwater and the dense soils that exist in that area.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go back to Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, sorry, but Mr. Dwyer mentioned something in a 25-year period. That is of an adult working at a location. Did you do that as far as a minor child being exposed for 10 years, let's say, because they start there at 5, continue to play there till they're 15 or 16?
You're on mute, Scott. There you go.
There. As I mentioned, I did evaluate this under commercial land use conditions, but in my opinion, there is a safety factor built into that evaluation large enough to account for children who might be there 8, 10 years, whatever the case may be. So I feel confident that children were protected by the evaluation that we performed. So hopefully that answers your question.
But you haven't looked at any studies of children who have been exposed to similar chemicals for a period of time to say that it has no effect on them as far as their development, their mental capacities, etc.
No, I'm not really aware of any studies in children. Most studies of PERC, at least, have been performed. What studies haven't done have been performed on adult populations, and most of those were retrospective epidemiological studies of workers. But certainly, as I mentioned, children can be more susceptible to chemical exposures. Unfortunately, there isn't much work in that area available.
All right, thank you. And my last question, and I do say last, gentleman and lady, is to Mr. Carbajal. Sir, have you tested a well away from the site in West Fresno? Because if I remember correctly, the water table runs in a kind of southwesterly direction under Fresno, through West Fresno. Have you tested a well downstream from that site to see if there's PERC or any of the other chemical contaminants in those wells?
Yes, so the city operates approximately 250 groundwater wells across the city, and all of those wells are tested periodically. And so in terms of this site, the majority of the well sites are non-detect for PERC. There have been at one well some very low level detections, which are below the maximum contaminant level. So we're talking very small amounts that are currently being monitored. And so we do not see we don't see any indicators that there is widespread groundwater contamination. But I think, as Mr. Betts indicated, there will be some additional studies at the site to verify whether or not there's any specific groundwater contamination in that local area.
That one well that you did note, is that in a westerly, southwesterly area away from the site?
Almost directly north. So the opposite of the gradient of the groundwater.
Interesting. Any of your wells going in this westerly, southwesterly direction tested?
Yeah, so all of the wells are tested. We have, approximately 3 to 4 wells that are, in the 1 to 2 mile range moving westerly from the site. And, test results indicate there are no detections for PERC at those locations.
All right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, I think we got your 3 questions after your last question, but we'll let that slide. Since this meeting is for the benefit of the public, and all of you guys may have questions answered. As I bring this to a close, I do want to remind the public of a couple of next steps. One is that we will begin the additional analysis from the next level of toxicologist report, which I anticipate end of January, February, Jim?
Yes, sir.
At that point, we will make the report public, and we will have another community meeting like this to answer any questions that report might have raised. So I want to make sure that everybody has as much time with the experts as we need to get comfortable with any of the findings of that toxicologist report. Hopefully by then, we would also have an idea, Jim, of what the cleanup plan would be.
Well, that probably will take a little while, but I will say this. I think when we get those results back, we will have a sense of the nature and extent of any remediation. We won't have a specific plan, but that will start to give us information as to whether there's a groundwater issue, whether it's purely going to be soil vapor extraction.
Okay. And then from the facilities, and as you all know, COVID poses a bigger threat right now for anybody using that facility in a congregate setting than the contamination has been detected. So we do plan on probably keeping that facility closed through the summer, because I don't anticipate having vaccine available for the general public until probably after June or August, based on the best reporting that we're getting right now at the state, federal, and the local level from our public health director. So we should plan for the facility to remain closed. We will continue to secure it, check up on it, make sure folks are not utilizing it or encampments are growing in that area. We'll continue to proceed with the renovations we have in the multiple community centers in the pipeline right now. And you guys should expect an additional update sometime in January, February, early of next year, with us releasing the findings of the report and also having an additional community meeting so we can, go through it together and get any questions we have answered. So with that, if you guys have any additional questions, if you have any recommendations or like to see additional analysis in different areas, please send us an email. You can simply email it to me directly, miguel.arias@fresno.gov. I'll get it to our team so they can incorporate it to our overall plan and next steps. With that, I'll bring this community meeting to a close. Thank you to the panelists and the experts for answering the questions of the community, and thank you to the community for participating in this process. And hopefully we'll see you sometime early next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm so sorry. Thank you.